Hey guys, tonight we begin with something unexpectedly cozy and a little bleedy. You're not on Olympus. You're not in a royal hall of marble columns and harp music. Tonight you wake up inside a dark, cool cave on the island of Crete. The air smells like goat fur and sweet hay, and somewhere nearby a baby is screaming like he just discovered thunder, which technically he kinda has. You're not a god. You're not a hero. You're you. Dropped into ancient myth like a confused time traveler with no Wi-Fi and a handful of fig seeds in your pocket. The baby in the corner is Zeus. Yes, that's Zeus, still in diapers and still capable of vaporizing your sandals if he sneezes too hard. And the creature nursing him is not some angelic nymph or divine queen. Nope. It's a goat. A very patient, very magical goat. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I always love seeing who's still awake out there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squint as your eyes adjust to the dim glow of torchlight, flickering against damp cave walls. There's straw everywhere. Somewhere a wooden rattle, carved into the shape of a bull, clinks softly against the stone floor. And there, just beyond a pile of wool blankets, is Amalthea the goat nurse. She's larger than any goat you've seen. Her horns curve like the handle of an ancient drinking cup. Her coat shines silver in the moonlight, leaking through the cave's cracks. And her udders are, well, let's just say she's got enough divine milk to feed a storm god. Zeus is tiny now. Round cheeks, fat fingers, a golden curl stuck to his sweaty forehead. You get the feeling he's already aware he's important. He cries like royalty, like the sky itself might pause to listen. And Amalthea. She just keeps chewing her cud, licking his face when he cries too long, and occasionally swatting away a curious bee with her tail. You have a feeling this goat is smarter than she lets on. According to myth, this humble mountain hideout is where Rhea, wife of Cronus, smuggled her infant son after tricking her husband into swallowing a rock instead. Cronus had a habit of swallowing children whole, blame of prophecy, and Rhea, understandably, had reached her limit, so she ran clutching her newborn like contraband and handed him over to the care of Amalthea, a creature some say was a goat, others say a nymph who just had goatish energy. Historians still argue whether Amalthea was literal or symbolic, a stand-in for abundance nature, or just an excuse to draw goats on temple walls. You're not here to resolve the debate. You're here to help change divine diapers. Outside you hear rustling. Not dangerous rustling, more like a troop of overly enthusiastic dancers bumping into rocks. The Kuretes warrior dancers who bang their spears and shields together to drown out baby Zeus's cries are doing their thing. They leap around shouting ancient chants, trying to confuse any spies Cronus might have sent. It's a bit much. You briefly consider handing them a tambourine and suggesting they take it down a notch. Back in the cave, Zeus is fussing again. Amalthea nudges a soft stone near him with her hoof, his favorite pillow. You drape another wool blanket over him and sit back, inhaling the musky scent of goat hair moss and burning olive oil. Somewhere nearby, the cave's natural spring trickles softly like a mythic white noise machine. Amalthea chews thoughtfully. You wonder how many gods she's raised. Probably just the one, but still she moves with the tired grace of someone who's kept powerful toddlers from setting forests on fire. She even has a way of curling around Zeus when he sleeps, her body curved like a crescent moon, her breath slow and warm. It's maternal, oddly touching, and yet there's magic under the surface. The legends claim that Amalthea's milk gave Zeus strength, not just calories, but divine power. That every gulp brought him closer to the storm-wielding ruler he'd become. It's possible this was metaphorical. Or maybe goat milk in myth just came with thunder-flavored vitamins. One story, slightly more fringe, says Amalthea's horns were made of starlight, and when she shook her head, constellations rattled loose. Another claims that when Zeus cried too loudly, Amalthea brayed back so loudly that the winds would hush in confusion. You wonder if that's why it's so quiet outside now. As you tuck another blanket over the god baby and pat his golden curls, you start to feel something curious content. Sure, you're in a goat cave. Sure, your sandals are made of questionable leather, and you haven't seen soap in days. But there's something sacred in this quiet. In this absurd little family, a divine infant, an immortal goat, and you, the honorary babysitter. Not far from the cave's entrance, vines curl lazily around the rocks. A faint breeze rustles through them, bringing with it the scent of wild thyme and mountain pine. Zeus stirs but doesn't wake. Amalthea yawns. You think you hear a distant thunderclap like a baby's hiccup on Olympus. And you sleepy, slightly itchy from hay, but safe, lean back and stare at the shadows dancing across the ceiling. The god of thunder is snoring beside you. The goat nurse breathes in time with the cave's heartbeat. And you begin to wonder if this is how legends begin. Not with lightning, but with warmth wool and one very good goat. It's sometime just before dawn now, though. There's no way to tell for sure. You're still nestled in the shadowy heart of the cave, where the smell of hay and goat lingers like a blanket, and the world outside seems more like rumor than reality. Baby Zeus lies curled near Amalthea, one tiny hand, clutching her fur as if anchoring himself to the earth, or maybe to something older than Olympus. She's not just any goat. You've gathered that much already. The ancients didn't treat her like a barnyard animal. Amalthea, by most accounts, was sacred, regal, maybe even celestial. And while some poets spun her as a literal goat, others imagined her as a nymph who raised goats and had one particular favorite. Either way, the key point is this: she nursed the future king of the gods. Not out of ambition, not because she was told to, but because he needed her. Zeus squeals in his sleep and flails an arm. Amalthea shifts, gently repositioning herself so he can nuzzle in again. Her movement is careful, precise, like a creature who's learned to soothe a being capable of casually inventing thunderstorms. You crouch a little closer now, watching. She licks his cheek with a slow, deliberate swipe. And then there's a crackle. A faint one. Not quite thunder. More like static. Like the pop you hear before a summer storm rolls in. Zeus hiccups. Is that what milk from a divine goat does? Historians still argue whether Amalthea's milk was just nourishment or something more potent, charged with energy from the cosmos itself. Some fringe theories suggest that lightning isn't something Zeus learned, but something he absorbed. That every feeding session didn't just fatten him up, it rewired him. Taught his cells how to harness sky fire. You glance at the empty clay bowl beside you, crusted with a milky residue. You'd be lying if you said you weren't tempted to lick it. But you don't, because you've seen what Zeus can do to bugs that land on his face. They don't fly away, they disintegrate. The cave has a rhythm now. You've been here long enough to recognize it. The soft padding of Amalthea's hooves as she shifts her weight. The occasional whistle of a karete, rehearsing a particularly dramatic stomp. The cooing of Zeus, whose breath smells faintly like wild herbs and something distinctly electric. It's a weird job, but someone has to be here. You start thinking about how none of this would have happened without Rhea. She's the one who ran. The one who hid this child from a husband who had already swallowed 5 of her others like appetizers at a prophecy-themed dinner party. She snuck out in the night, carrying a god in her arms, looking for a mountain and a goat. It wasn't a great plan, but it worked. According to a fringe myth passed down on the edges of Dorian oral tradition, Amalthea was more than willing to help, but only after Rhea offered her something in return. A stone shaped like a heart. Or maybe a heart shaped like a stone. The details vary. But the point is, even gods need bargains sometimes. Even sacred goats expect fair compensation. You look at Amalthea now, lying curled like a great comma of peace beside the baby she's kept alive. Her eyes blink slowly, knowingly, as if she understands more about fate than she lets on. Perhaps she does. She was there before Zeus could speak. Before he could thunder, she witnessed his first cry, his first laugh, his first tantrum, maybe even his first miracle. You wonder briefly if this was the origin of the phrase, "don't cry over spilled milk." Because when divine milk spills, it doesn't just stain your blanket, it scorches it. A few burnt corners in the straw tell you that lesson's been learned before. Still she stays, loyal, silent, unfazed. You stretch out on the straw, letting your head rest on a bundle of linen that probably belonged to some poor shepherd who wandered in and got conscripted into myth. Zeus mumbles in his sleep. Amalthea gives a low, gentle bleat that sounds almost like a lullaby. It vibrates through the stone floor and into your chest. And that's when you feel it a low rumble outside. You sit up, not in panic, you're just alert. The carettis are still clanging and stomping, but there's a new note to the cave's ambient music. Something softer, warmer. A kind of golden glow trickles through a crack in the ceiling, lighting up Amalthea's horns like silver filigree. Sunrise. You made it through the night. You a goat and the literal god of thunder. You close your eyes for just a moment, soaking it all in the faint smell of olive oil on your hands. The distant sea breeze curling in from the coast. The soft crunch of Amalthea's chewing as she rips another mouthful of hay from a woven basket. This isn't Olympus, but it's sacred, in a quieter, sleepier kind of way. And somewhere in the future, you won't live to see Zeus will stand tall and command storms with a flick of his wrist. But for now, he dreams. And his dreams smell like milk wool and lightning. You wake to the feeling of goat breath on your face. It's not unpleasant, warm, a little grassy, tinged with something sweet, maybe thyme. Amalthea is staring down at you with the casual authority of someone who knows she's more important than you. And to be fair, she probably is. After all, you're the one sleeping in the hay while she's busy raising the most temperamental infant in all of mythology. Zeus is awake too, of course, kicking wildly at the air like he's fighting invisible giants. You half expect thunder to crack each time his foot lands. Instead, a soft ripple of static jumps from his curls to your fingers as you reach out to adjust his blanket. You've grown used to that little shocks, the scent of ozone, lingering like a bedtime story gone wrong. You're not sure when it happened, but you've become part of the team now. Not quite a caret, not quite a nanny, not quite mythical, but close enough to matter. Your role helped keep the god baby hidden and alive. Cronus, father of Zeus, still looms like a storm cloud over this cave. His hunger for prophecy proofing knows no bounds. He's already swallowed 5 of his children, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, without so much as a salt garnish. It's only thanks to Rhea's quick thinking and a decoy rock and a blanket that baby number 6 got smuggled away to this cave in Crete. You meanwhile are responsible for playing your part in the ancient art of divine hiding. There's a routine now. Amalthea nurses you, burp, Zeus. The carettis perform their thunderous battle dances just outside the mouth of the cave, clanging their bronze weapons, shouting nonsense, doing cartwheels no one asked for. The whole idea is to drown out Zeus's cries, so Cronus doesn't hear and go sniffing around the island like a divine bloodhound with digestive issues. It works, so far. There's one moment, though, around midday when the cave grows quiet. Too quiet. Zeus naps. Amalthea curls up beside him. The carettis, finally exhausted, lean against rocks and drink something fermented from goat bladders. And that's when the fear creeps in. What if he finds you? Historians still argue whether Cronus ever actually suspected the decoy plan. Some sources say he was blissfully smug. Others suggest he had his doubts. Fringe theorists insist that Cronus knew all along and simply chose to ignore it, perhaps secretly hoping one of his children would rise against him, if only to break the curse of paranoid fatherhood that seemed baked into his DNA. You pull the blanket up over Zeus's feet and try not to think about it. Instead, you look around the cave. It's not just a hole in a mountain. Over time, it's become cozy, Someone, possibly a mythic intern, hung small charms above the entrance carved olive wood feathers, what looks like a rabbit's foot but might be from a very confused griffin. There are flat stones stacked like makeshift tables, one with a bowl of olives and goat cheese, another with what you suspect are teething rings made of bone. You pick one up, it sparks faintly. Everything's enchanted, you mutter. Amalthea gives you a look. You're not sure if it's agreement or judgment. But here's where it gets weirder. The toys Zeus plays with don't stay toys for long. One day, he starts chewing on a small carved eagle, and the next morning an actual eagle lands on a rock outside and refuses to leave. Another day, he babbles while holding a thundercloud-shaped rattle, and by dusk, a real storm gathers over the mountain. Coincidence, maybe, but you are starting to suspect that, even as a toddler, Zeus isn't just absorbing power, he's shaping the world around him, one sneeze at a time. And what of Amalthea? She doesn't flinch. When lightning dances across the ceiling in little flickers of blue, she yawns and nudges Zeus to the side. When a pile of pebbles suddenly levitates midair, she simply swats at them with her tail like gnats. Some myths say Amalthea wasn't just a nursemaid, that she was chosen, selected from all creatures mortal or divine, because she could withstand the uncontainable energy of the god-to-be. That only a goat sturdy, stubborn, grounded could calm something as wild as thunder. Others go further. They say she wasn't really a goat at all, but a disguised titaness, or a celestial being in caprine form. You don't see any wings, but you wouldn't be shocked if she suddenly started reciting ancient law in perfect hexameter. As the sun slips low, you light a small oil lamp with a bit of tinder from the fire pile. The cave glows golden again. Zeus sleeps soundly now, curled like a comma under Amalthea's chin. Her breath rises and falls, soothing and steady. You sit by the mouth of the cave where the wind has started to whistle gently through the rocks. From this perch, you can see the sea, just a glint of it far off between jagged hills. Waves like folded silk, and you realize something strange. You've been here long enough to forget the world you came from. The one with streetlights and scrolling news feeds. Here the only updates are goat bleats and baby thunder. You're not sure how long this peace will last. Cronus is still out there. The prophecy still looms. One day Zeus will rise, confront his father, and fulfill the cycle that defines Olympian succession. But not today. Today is for quiet, for hiding, for watching a storm sleep swaddled in wool and goat milk. And for now, you are exactly where you're supposed to be. There's a reason nobody writes lullabies about baby gods cutting teeth. It starts at dawn when Zeus jolts upright with a screech that could shear a sheep. Your mid-snore nestled comfortably in straw when suddenly your molars are vibrating. Amalthea doesn't move. She's been through this before. But you newly appointed honorary divine nanny are scrambling for the goat hide satchel of distractions. And then you see it a single pearly nub poking through the gum line of Mount Olympus's future CEO. Teething, a universal torment. But when your baby is a proto-god of the skies, teething means something more. The air is sparking. His drool smells faintly like ozone. A nearby rock splits for no reason at all. You try everything. Rocking him in your arms, he levitates briefly and spins like a top. Singing to him, he weeps harder. Apparently, your pitch offends immortals. Amalthea tries to, nudging him gently, letting him headbutt her side, licking his forehead. Still he screams. Then she does something strange. She kneels, shifts her weight, and lowers one of her horns. Zeus grabs it both hands and bites. A flash of light, then quiet. You open your eyes, blinking at the strange hush that follows divine tantrums. Zeus is now gnawing Amalthea's horn like a teething ring made of cosmic bone. His eyes are half-lidded with relief. Amalthea winces slightly, but endures it with the patience of a goat who knows her destiny includes divine dental work. Later myths would say that one of Amalthea's horns broke off in the process, and from it came the cornucopia, the horn of plenty. An endless source of food, drink, and delight. But right now it's just a very tired goat and a slightly less screamy toddler god. You inspect the horn in question. There's a faint crack. A shimmer of golden mist leaks from the tip, almost like nectar. You think about catching it in a cup, but Amalthea shoots you a look that makes you sit back down. Point taken. Historians still debate whether the Horn of Plenty myth came from Zeus's actual childhood or if it was later symbolic, a metaphor for divine provision abundance, and perhaps the generosity of caretakers often overlooked in the shadow of louder legends. But you're here now, you saw it. A god cried and a goat offered her own horn to help. That's not a symbol, that's a fact. Of course, once Zeus stops chewing, he needs more entertainment. You try rolling a ball of woven reeds. He incinerates it. You hand him a carved wooden bowl, he giggles, and a real bull appears outside the cave for 10 seconds, before running off in confusion. So you hand him the horn again, and thus a pattern is born. Every time he cries, Amalthea leans her head. Every time he teethes, he grabs. And every time you see the crack in her horn widen just a bit more, your heart clenches. Not because it's sad, because it's beautiful. You didn't expect this kind of devotion from a goat. There's an old fragment of Hesiod, one of those dusty lines scholars like to fight over at symposia, that suggests Amalthea's horn was once offered to mortals by Zeus himself as thanks. That he gave it to humanity as a reminder of the creature who fed him when no one else dared. Another version claims the horn was stolen passed down through gods and kings like a divine lottery ticket. But all those tales feel like echoes. You're watching the real thing now. A mother figure offering herself to a child made of thunder and storm, not expecting applause. Just hoping he'll stop drooling sparks onto the bedding. Outside, the Corettes begin their afternoon routine. More stomping, more shield clashing. One of them accidentally smacks his own shin and mutters a curse. You wonder if they get hazard pay. Probably not. You step to the edge of the cave for a moment, letting the breeze cool your overheated face. The sea glints in the distance. Far off, an eagle cries a sharp echo bouncing through the cliffs. Zeus shrieks in response. You look back and find him pointing at the sky. Eagle, you say aloud, testing the word. He claps, and a bolt of lightning zips horizontally across the clouds. Okay, so language lessons will have to wait. You sit beside him again, brushing hay from his chubby legs, adjusting the linen around his shoulders. He leans forward, drools dramatically onto your lap, and then buries his face back into Amalthea's side. The horn, always the horn. You wonder what it's like to be the source of comfort for a creature destined to rule the world. To give and give and give until part of you breaks off, and even then still give more. Amalthea doesn't seem to mind. Her eyes stay soft. Her breathing stays slow. If anything, she seems to glow now. Just slightly. Like whatever magic is in Zeus is beginning to radiate back into her. A loop of divine gratitude, quiet and unspoken. The cracked horn gleams faintly in the lamplight. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you think this is how relics are born. Not with grand speeches, not with marble temples, but in the quiet moments when someone bites you because their gums hurt and you let them. Later generations will speak of the cornucopia, of feasts that never end, of wine jugs that refill on their own, of festivals in her honor. But you'll remember the truth. It started with a goat, a tooth, and a tantrum. And now finally Zeus sleeps. You settle back into your corner of the cave. Amalthea gives you a once-over, then lowers her head. The air is still warm. Thunder rumbles in the distance, but softly this time. Almost like a lullaby. You smile. Divine teething crisis averted. The thing no one warns you about when helping raise a future god mealtimes. Not because of the food, though, let's be honest. You've never fully trusted that loaf of goat milk, bread with raisins that might actually be beetles. No, the issue is timing. Zeus is always hungry, but not always focused. One minute he's drooling for ambrosia. The next he's chasing a moth around the cave with a rock that may or may not be sentient. You've gotten used to improvising. Breakfast, if you can call it that, usually starts with you rummaging through the satchel of mythic pantry scraps, figs wrapped in olive leaves, a small jug of goat milk chilled in the spring, and a tiny clay pot of something labeled ambrosia in scratchy looping letters. You're not sure who wrote it. You're more concerned by the fact it glows faintly in the dark. You scoop a bit out onto a carved wooden spoon. The moment the scent hits the air, something like wild honey orange blossoms, and lightning Zeus's head swivels toward you like a baby hawk spotting prey. He doesn't walk yet, but he levitates. He floats slowly across the cave feet, dangling eyes locked on the spoon like it owes him money. You brace yourself. Feeding him is delicate work. Too much, and he starts crackling with static. Too little, and he lets out a wail that rattles the cave walls and gives Amalthea indigestion. You manage 3 good spoonfuls before disaster strikes. A bee. It zips in from the cave's entrance, unbothered by mythic boundaries, and lands on the rim of the ambrosia pot. Zeus squeals, half delight, half mine, and claps his hands. You dive. Too late. The bee vanishes in a puff of blue smoke. One less bee in the world. One slightly smug toddler god. Amalthea rolls her eyes. You swear she does. There's an old story whispered on the slopes of Mount Ida that the ambrosia Zeus ate as a child wasn't made by gods at all. It was harvested by bees. Not regular bees, of course. Divine bees. Possibly nymphs in bee form, depending on who you ask. They stored the nectar in golden hexagonal jars under the roots of sacred olive trees. Some say Amalthea guarded them. Others say she milked them like cows. You try not to picture this. Historians still debate the nutritional properties of ambrosia. Was it a real substance? A metaphor for divine privilege? A fermented honey wine fringe? Theorists suggest it might have been a psychoactive blend of herbs and wild pollen, which if true might explain why Zeus often giggles at nothing and occasionally lifts rocks with his mind. After breakfast, it's burping time. You lift him gently. He hums sleepy from the sugar and divinity. A faint crackle tickles your palm. And then he lets out a burp so powerful, a nearby torch extinguishes itself. Amalthea doesn't flinch. She's seen worse. You're still recovering from last week's hiccup incident that melted half your sandals. You set Zeus back on the straw. He grabs a fistful of hay and attempts to eat it. You redirect. This time you bring out a new item from the satchel, a carved olive wood spoon. It's not magic, just spoony. You hand it over, and for some miraculous reason, Zeus is fascinated. He turns it over and over in his hands, tapping it against the floor, the wall, your knee. He squeals, and then with great concentration, he points it at Amalthea. A spark flies from the tip. You blink. The goat blinks. Zeus grins like he's discovered fire. And just like that, the spoon becomes the scepter. For the rest of the day, he parades around the cave with it held aloft, zapping pebbles, humming nonsense, and occasionally crowning himself by placing the spoon on his own head. He's not subtle or quiet, but he's undeniably himself. There's a rhythm to this now. You feed him, you dodge lightning. Amalthea keeps chewing patient and warm the anchor that keeps this entire divine daycare from unraveling. At some point mid-afternoon, Zeus attempts to feed you in return. He scoops up a handful of moss and shoves it toward your mouth with royal glee. You pretend to chew it. He laughs so hard he hiccups again, and you throw yourself on the last remaining oil lamp to prevent another cave fire. Parenting apparently is universal. Later, once the spoons have been confiscated and the moss gently returned to nature, Zeus curls up again beside Amalthea. He sighs loud dramatic and throws a chubby leg over her side like a child hugging a mountain. And you sit back watching them both. The goat, the god, the spoon. You didn't expect this job to involve so much improvisation, or this much genuine tenderness. You were expecting fire and fury, divine wrath, and radiant glory. Instead, you got sleepy giggles and bee explosions. And honestly, it's better this way. You reach for the last fig in the pouch, take a bite, and lean your head against the cool stone wall. The lamp flickers. Zeus murmurs something in a language that hasn't been invented yet. Amalthea lets out a long, soft exhale. And somewhere outside, beyond the carret's stomping and the endless hum of mountain wind, you feel the world hold its breath just for a moment. The god of thunder is fed, the goat is content. And you're full of fig lightning and maybe a little bit of ambrosia too. It's not until the 3rd week that you notice the horn droppings. Not horns dropping, droppings, as in little round goat nuggets that occasionally shimmer faintly in the firelight. You were sweeping the cave floor with a bundle of dry thyme when you noticed one rolling uphill against gravity. You crouched, blinked, sniffed, and then, because you're curious and possibly sleep deprived, you poked it. It vibrated. Amalthea watched you the whole time, chewing slowly, like a creature well aware of how weird her biology had become. You gather a small pile. Some of them glitter faintly like mica. One hums. Another feels warm to the touch. You decide not to touch the slightly buzzing one again. Then you do a thing that would earn you a stern talking to in any real museum. You taste one. It tastes like honey, and maybe victory. Later, when you ask one of the Koretz about it, the short one with the chipped shield and too many opinions, he explains that it's an open secret. Everything around Zeus starts turning mythic. Even goat droppings. Especially goat droppings. Apparently, when a divine creature nurses a divine infant, the fallout, magical, literal, or digestive, is unpredictable. You stare at the tiny glitter poop in your palm and wonder if it's valuable. Probably. There are myths, half-whispered, hardly remembered, that say the ground around Amalthea's cave was so fertile, it sprouted golden barley and sweet figs in winter. Some say that everything she touched took on a kind of quiet glow. Others go full allegorical and claim her droppings seeded the wealth of Crete itself, that olive groves and mineral veins sprang from her passing. Historians still argue whether this was literal or just poetic shorthand for goat poop. Good fertilizer, but you've seen stranger things in this cave. One of the more obscure traditions even insists that the glittering pellets, when ground up and mixed with sea salt, could cure warts, repel curses, and help mortals remember forgotten dreams. You suspect that last part may have been added by a poet who once fell asleep in the sun for too long. Regardless, you now have a pouch of mythic goat poop, which makes you, what a collector, a future relic trader. You decide to call it your emergency barter fund. Back inside, Zeus is playing with a piece of linen like it's a war banner. He spins and falls dramatically onto Amalthea, who barely reacts. She's used to being a jungle gym. Her patience is infinite, and you're beginning to think it's not just maternal instinct, it's divine insulation. Amalthea's role isn't just nourishment or comfort anymore. She's becoming the axis of this little hidden universe, the gravitational center around which baby Zeus spins. You two, in your own way, have started orbiting her, taking cues from her stillness, her lack of panic, her refusal to make anything a bigger deal than it needs to be, even when it involves literal thunder diapers. She eyes your glittering pouch. You freeze mid-step, suddenly wondering if she wants it back. She flicks her tail, once turns her head and resumes chewing. You've been dismissed. You settle onto your favorite rock near the cave's low wall, nibble on a dried fig, and watch as Zeus topples a pile of folded goat blankets, clearly proud of himself. You help him rebuild it. He knocks it down again. Rinse and repeat. Somewhere in this silly, repetitive ritual, you realize what this moment is. Play. Even gods need it, maybe especially gods. In most tales, Zeus bursts into the world wielding lightning and vengeance. But here in this quiet, dung-sparkled cave, he just wants to tumble around and pretend the corner of the straw mat is a monster. You oblige him by making it growl. He squeals with delight and zaps it into a puff of ash. You sigh. Amalthea snorts. By nightfall, the cave has returned to its familiar hum. The oil lamp flickers, the wind hushes. Outside, the stars begin to blink awake one by one. Zeus sleeps again on his back, one arm flung across his eyes like a melodramatic napper. Amalthea sleeps beside him. You swear you see her smile in her sleep. You rise and step just outside into the night. The sea glimmers far off a liquid ribbon wrapped around the hills. Crickets hum. The sky is clear, every star sharper than glass. You sit on a smooth rock warmed from the day's sun and pull out one of the glittering goat droppings from your pouch. It glows faintly in your palm, warm, steady, ridiculous, but maybe that's what this whole story is: ridiculous and glowing, quietly divine. You roll the pellet between your fingers, smile to yourself, and tuck it back inside the pouch. No one will believe this later, and honestly, that's part of the charm. Eventually, the stories begin to contradict themselves. One day it's a goat, the next day a nymph with shimmering skin and a rather ambitious hairdo. Some versions say Amalthea lived forever, placed among the stars as the constellation Capricorn. Others insist she died quietly under a fig tree, her bones turned to marble by grateful Olympians. A few even suggest she never existed at all, that she was simply a metaphor for nature or nurture, or how even thunder gods once needed warm milk and lullabies. And then there's the bees. You are sorting fresh bedding near the cave wall when you overhear two of the Caretes arguing again about the real identity of Zeus's first caretaker. I tell you, the tall one insists, pointing with his spear, she wasn't a goat. She was a melisse. A bee nymph, the other scoffs, polishing his helmet with what might be sacred goat spit. Ridiculous, but you've heard this before. It's not new. There's a whole offshoot of the myth that credits Zeus's upbringing not to Amalthea, but to a trio of divine bees, the Melissae, who nursed him with sacred honey and taught him the hum of divine order. The idea has some weight. After all, honey shows up in every myth, like an overachieving seasoning, healing wounds, preserving bodies, luring nymphs, and of course, feeding gods. One strand of tradition even claims that Zeus's first words were spoken to a bee. What those words were, no one agrees. One theory suggests it was Zap, which tracks. Historians still debate whether these different versions, goat, nymph, bee, represent separate myths colliding, or whether ancient storytellers were just creatively multitasking. After all, who's to say Zeus wasn't raised by all of them at once, a kind of divine co-op? You look at Amalthea now lounging in her usual spot, chewing a cud that might have once been a sacred herb. She doesn't seem jealous. If anything, she looks mildly amused by the whole conversation. Let them argue, her expression seems to say. You and I know the truth. And you do. You've seen it. You've cleaned up after it. Still, you start paying attention, keeping mental notes, compiling the contradictions. Some myths say Amalthea was the daughter of Oceanus, a sea nymph disguised as a goat to escape her enemies. Others claim she was the goat whose hide was later used by Zeus to make his magical shield, the Aegis, because apparently the ultimate defense in battle is wearing your foster mom. Then there's the Cretan angle. Locals tell you that the cave itself has been debated for centuries. Some claim it's the Dictaean cave on Mount Dicte. Others swear it's the Idaean cave on Mount Ida. You've peeked outside, you're pretty sure it's a cave. Whether it's the cave is above your pay grade. Crete, for what it's worth, leans into the mythology with gusto. You've seen stone markers, scratched lines on the wall, even a child's drawing of a thunderbolt on goat legs. It's both reverent and deeply silly, which feels right. A fringe theory, your favorite, claims that the whole story of Amalthea was crafted by early Cretan tourism boards. That Rhea, in desperation, stumbled into a village full of bored shepherds who offered a goat, a cave, and a crash course in babysitting. The rest, as they say, is divine marketing. You glance at Zeus. He's gnawing on a piece of slate and humming to himself. His left eye is glowing faintly. That's new. Amalthea stands, walks over, and licks the glow off his face. It works. She settles beside him again. He lies down without protest. That's parenting, you think. Cosmic edition. You step outside for a moment into the dusk. The hills stretch out like old hands under a purple sky. Somewhere in the grass, a bee buzzes lazily. You watch it float past your ear, trailing the scent of wild thyme. And then, perhaps because you're tired, or because this world is starting to sink into your skin, you think you hear the bee speak. Thank her, it hums. You blink, the bee is gone. Inside the cave, Zeus giggles in his sleep. Amalthea exhales. Maybe it was a bee nymph. Maybe it was a goat. Maybe the truth has horns and wings. All you know is that a god is alive, the world hasn't ended, and the cave still smells like hay smoke and something faintly sweet. You return to your spot near the wall, wrap your cloak around your shoulders, and settle in for another mythic night. In this story, contradictions aren't flaws. They're just layers. and you're part of them now. It's late afternoon when you wander outside the cave and realize something: the cave isn't the only thing hiding in this mountain. You follow a narrow goat path that winds past gnarled olive trees and clusters of wild thyme. The air is warm, heavy with a scent of sun-baked herbs and goat musk, which, let's be honest, clings to you now like a badge of honor. You pause at a ledge and glance back. From here, the cave disappears, completely camouflaged by jutting rocks and a clump of bushes that definitely weren't there yesterday. Did Amalthea plant those? Below you, the island of Crete unfurls like a lazy animal. Rolling hills, blue-gray cliffs, and in the distance, a sliver of ocean so bright, it looks like the gods accidentally spilled mercury. You stare at it and feel very, very small. And then you think about the cave again, how it doesn't seem to be on any map, and how you've never seen it from the outside unless you're already standing in it. You begin to wonder, is this just a cave? Or is it a portal? Historians still argue about the geography of Zeus's childhood. Was it Mount Dicte or Mount Ida? Was there one cave or several? Some fringe theorists even suggest that the cave exists in more than one place at once, that it's not a fixed point but a shifting seam in the world, a kind of mythological loophole stitched into the landscape. You kick a pebble down the slope and imagine it appearing in Athens, or Atlantis, or falling forever through the gap between what is and what's been imagined. When you return, something feels different. Zeus is levitating again, nothing new, but this time he's spinning. Slowly. Upside down. Amalthea is chewing calmly nearby, unmoved. You step carefully, trying not to interrupt the hovering. One of his curls brushes against your cheek as he floats past. A moment later, he drops gently onto the straw with a soft plop. New trick, you ask. He responds with a tiny clap and a burp that sends a puff of warm wind across the cave. You're going to assume that means yes. You settle back into your usual spot and let your thoughts wander. Something about this mountain feels alive. Not just in the goats and bees sense. More like the ground listens. Like the walls remember. You run your fingers across a section of the cave wall. At first glance, it's just stone. But as your eyes adjust, you see faint grooves, carvings. A spiral. A bird. A bolt of lightning with tiny goat horns. Someone's been here before. You trace the spiral with your thumb. It tingles faintly. Not in a magic way. More like a memory brushing against your skin. Was this place always sacred? Or did it become sacred because of what happened here? There's a theory shared only in whispers during certain symposiums after the third jug of wine that the cave itself chose to become mythic. That some places are drawn to power like roots to water. That once Rhea placed Zeus here, the rocks shifted, the air thickened, and time bent inward like a vine curling around a promise. You believe it now. You've lived it. Outside, thunder rolls low across the sky. No rain, just sound, a sleepy warning. Amalthea lifts her head, listens, then settles back down. Zeus grabs a stick and begins poking it into a pile of moss. He's humming a melody that doesn't belong to this world, soft, looping, oddly rhythmic. You lean closer and realize you know it. It's the pattern of thunder. The beat you've heard in the clouds every night since arriving. He's not just making sounds, he's remembering the sky. And the cave once again hums in reply. You glance around. The walls shimmer faintly in the lamplight. The straw crackles underfoot. Even the shadows seem to hold their breath. This isn't just babysitting anymore. It's witnessing. It's participating in the construction of a god, not from marble or prophecy, but from goat milk, moss toys, thunder songs, and the geography of sacred hiding. And you're no longer just a visitor. You're part of the story now. Later, as the oil lamp flickers and the wind brushes the cave mouth like a long, slow exhale, you notice something new on the far wall. A mark, a symbol. Fresh, a spiral. Like the one outside. You don't remember carving it, but your hand tingles. You wake up to a smell. Not the usual goat musk meets fig syrup that's come to define your cave experience, but something sharper. Smokier. Like burnt air. Like the exact scent a lightning bolt might leave behind if it got tired. and decided to nap on your pillow. Zeus is sitting bolt upright in the straw, his hair standing on end, and in his chubby little hands, he's holding what looks like a rock, just a regular rock, except it's glowing faintly and has a small crackling aura that definitely wasn't there yesterday. You groan, sit up, and rub your eyes. Amalthea across the cave is eyeing him cautiously while chewing a mouthful of old bedding. You give her a look. She blinks slowly as if to say, "Your problem now." And so begins the day Zeus learns to thunder. Not in the big dramatic sense you might expect, no godly speeches, no sky splitting in two, no giant eagle swooping down to offer him a crown. No, it begins with a pebble, a hiccup, and a very unfortunate fig tree. Let's rewind. The pebble, as best you can tell, came from the back corner of the cave. Zeus found it while trying to bite the floor. He picked it up, waved it around, and without warning, squeezed. There was a pop, a spark, a whoosh of air, and a fig tree, small-potted, very much not dangerous, vaporized. Nothing left but a smoldering pot and one lonely fig spinning on the ground like it was waiting for applause. Zeus stared at his hand like it had just told him a secret. Then he laughed. And you panicked. Amalthea didn't. She wandered over to the blackened spot on the floor, sniffed once, and let out a sigh you felt in your bones. It was a sigh that said, "It begins." Because thunder isn't just a power, it's a skill. And learning to control it is going to involve some trial and error, mostly error. You try to explain this to Zeus using your best soothing voice. No more zapping the furniture, okay? He claps. The rock zaps again. You throw a blanket over it. It continues to hum ominously. Historians still argue over Zeus's first thunderbolt. Was it forged by the Cyclopes, gifted by Gaia, crafted by divine blacksmiths in the fiery pits of Mount Etna? Possibly. But there's an older version, rare, half forgotten, that claims he learned it himself. That baby Zeus, nestled deep in a cave, discovered how to shape lightning using nothing more than curiosity, a few weird rocks, and the patience of a goat. You're starting to believe that version. You try to take the rock from him. He growls. It sparks. Amalthea steps between you like a weary bouncer at a tavern for toddlers. Okay, you whisper, "We keep the rock." So now you're cohabitating with a baby demigod who has discovered his own built-in storm mode. Every time he giggles, the air shimmers. Every time he cries, the lamps flicker. Once when he burped, a sudden gust of wind knocked over your satchel and blew the sacred poop pellets into a neat little spiral. You are living inside a myth being written in real time, and the pen is a pebble. You start making safety adjustments. You stack the flammable bedding away from his play area. You keep a bowl of spring water handy at all times. You move Amalthea's feed pile farther from the torchlight just in case. He doesn't mean to be dangerous. That's the strange part. Every spark is joy. Every pop of energy is wonder. He's discovering the world through the lens of his own blooming power, and you get a front row seat. By midday, he's learned to throw the pebble. It arcs through the air like a comet trailing a tail of blue sparks. It hits a wall. The wall glows, the cave groans, dust rains down. Amalthea swats the pebble back with one hoof. Zeus squeals with delight. It's now a game. You consider quitting. You don't, because beneath the chaos there's something beautiful. Watching this child, this god, figure out who he is without scripts or rules or fear. Watching a being of infinite potential take shape not through war or conquest, but through tiny harmless experiments. You see the learning, the repetition, the way he holds the pebble at different angles, how he frowns when the spark fizzles and beams when it sings. He's building thunder, not just receiving it. And Amalthea. She's the grounding wire. She absorbs the wild surges, offers her flank when he's overwhelmed, licks his hair back into place when it fluffs up like a storm cloud. At sunset, you find the pebble glowing beside Zeus's sleeping hand. He's curled into Amalthea again, his body rising and falling in slow, steady rhythm. His fingers twitch like he's dreaming of sparks. You pick up the pebble carefully. It's warm. Not hot, not dangerous, just warm, like a secret, like a promise. You place it gently beside his pillow of moss and step out to watch the stars. Above you, the sky pulses. A soft rumble rolls across the horizon. Not loud, not sharp, just a sigh, like the mountain itself is pleased. It starts with a bite. Zeus awake far too early and in a mood that can only be described as ambitiously hungry latches onto Amalthea's horn again. Not to soothe his gums this time, but with purpose. Focus. Strategy. You don't notice at first. You're too busy trying to repair a goat milk spill that somehow seeped into your blanket stash. Amalthea, as usual, makes no fuss. But when you glance up and see Zeus chewing like he's unlocking a mystery, something clicks. Then it happens. With a soft crack, a sliver of the horn breaks away just a curved piece no larger than a bread roll. And immediately, a cascade of fruit spills from nowhere. Figs, dates, pomegranates, a baked barley loaf with steam still rising. A goblet of wine that somehow knows you're not supposed to drink on an empty stomach. The cave is now catered. Zeus claps once and dives face first into the figs. You freeze. Amalthea simply blinks, exhales, and returns to her hay pile like a mother who has seen things. You meanwhile approach the horn fragment with reverence and confusion, because you recognize it. This you realize is the horn, the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, the ancient always overflowing symbol of abundance feast and deeply suspicious generosity. And you were here when it happened. Historians still argue whether the cornucopia was born from divine intervention, ritual magic, or just one very determined toddler with a taste for late morning snacks. But here in the cave, it feels simpler. Zeus bit a sacred goat's horn, and the universe decided that effort deserved a buffet. The food doesn't stop. Every time Zeus touches the horn, more appears. Honey cakes, roasted chestnuts, something you swear is cheese-shaped like a dolphin. You try to make it stop by covering the horn with a cloth. It glows through the fabric. You shove it into the old storage jug. The jug leaks baklava. Eventually, you accept that today will be sticky. You take a piece of barley bread and chew slowly, watching Zeus lick honey off his fingers, and Amalthea doze like it's just another Tuesday. The scent of pomegranate fills the cave. It's rich, syrupy grounding. The kind of scent that makes you feel like you've done something right, like you've been rewarded. Which is a strange thing to think given the circumstances. You've slept on stone, bathed in cold springs, dodged baby thunderbolts and sacred goat poop. But now, with your hands full of warm food and your feet tucked beneath a sleeping god, you feel whole, fed, safe. You lean back against the cave wall and take in the scene. Zeus lies flat on his back, belly round, chewing a grape lazily. The horn glows faintly beside him, pulsing like it has a heartbeat. Amalthea's ears twitch. Somewhere near the entrance, a bee buzzes in and makes a slow circle around the feast, then buzzes out again, perhaps reporting back to its mystical nymph supervisors. You wonder how long this magic will last. If the horn will keep giving. If it has a limit. If it gets tired. One version of the myth says the cornucopia was eventually gifted to Gaia the Earth herself. Another says Zeus gave it to a mortal queen in a moment of generosity. Still another claims it simply vanished when Olympus was built too humble a relic for marble halls and golden thrones. But in this moment it's here, on a stone floor, between goat and god, humming softly. The cave is unusually quiet, as if even the rocks are chewing. You pick up the horn fragment and tilt it slightly. A stream of warm milk flows into an empty bowl. You set it down quickly before it starts producing an omelet. Right, you murmur. Horn stays on the moss. Zeus giggles. He understands more than he lets on. You've come to recognize that smirk. The kind that suggests he knows what he's doing, even if he can't explain it yet. He grabs a handful of pomegranate seeds, offers them to Amalthea, and places one in your palm like a gift. It pulses once. You eat it. It tastes like electricity in springtime. That night, the cave feels fuller. Not just because of the feast, but because of what it means. The cornucopia isn't just magic, it's gratitude. It's the universe answering hunger with abundance. It's the divine saying, "You've done enough today. Rest." And for once you do. The horn tucked beside Amalthea's hoof glows faintly through the dark. Zeus curls against her side. You lie on your straw belly, warm breath, slow, and listen to the soft rustle of goat fur and sleeping gods. Outside, the stars glimmer. Inside, plenty hums. Dinner with the gods, it turns out, is a loud affair. Not that you're eating with all the gods yet, but dinner with one future god and his overachieving goat mother is quite enough. After the cornucopia incident, Zeus has developed what you could charitably call standards. He now expects variety, he now expects spectacle, and unfortunately, he now expects dinner guests. Tonight's visitors are his siblings, sort of. They don't arrive in person, not yet. But they show up in stories, in tantrums, in skyward mutterings. You don't know how he knows they exist, but he does. And he has feelings. First up, Hera. You're minding your own business, wiping ambrosia off a rock, when Zeus suddenly starts pouting deeply. He crosses his arms and glares at the cave wall. Then he points at a goat-gnawed stick and lets out a frustrated shriek. You hand him a new stick. He throws it. He wants the one she had, apparently. You make a mental note, sibling rivalry activated. Then there's Poseidon. Zeus grabs the bowl of water you were using to soak your feet and upends it over his own head. He laughs, kicks the bowl, and immediately conjures what can only be described as a puddle with a personality. It ripples like it's trying to speak, then evaporates with a burp. You dry the floor. Hades shows up next, though not by name. Zeus finds a small dark hole near the back of the cave and stares into it for half an hour completely entranced. He whispers into it, giggles, reaches inside and pulls out nothing. You ask him what he found. He points solemnly and says a word that sounds suspiciously like mine. You let the hole be. Amalthea watches this all without judgment, or perhaps with deep familiarity. She's seen pantheons bloom before breakfast. Probably. As Zeus continues reenacting the soap opera of Olympus before it officially begins, you try to keep up. You organize a mealtime council using rocks and goat skulls. Zeus takes his seat on a small stone you now call the Little Throne, and distributes food to his imaginary guests with great ceremony. He places grapes in front of Hera's rock, a puddle beside Poseidon's skull, a dark fig and a beetle near Hades' shadow. You're served some barley. Amalthea gets a pile of thistle that glows faintly. You're not offended. Then Zeus stands. He holds up his spoon scepter, lets out a high-pitched war cry, and points dramatically at Amalthea's horn. You brace for an explosion. Instead, a delicate puff of honey-scented steam drifts upward, forming the shape of a crown before dissolving. Dinner ends in applause, mostly from Zeus. This whole ritual might seem ridiculous, and, in fairness, it is. But beneath the honey and chaos, something important is happening. He's learning relationships, he's practicing hierarchy, he's organizing the universe not in marble and prophecy yet, but in bread crust and imaginary soup. Historians still argue whether Zeus's position atop the pantheon was earned through power or simply assumed from birth. Some say he was always destined. Others suggest it was early experiences, childhood instincts, shaped by his environment that led him to define himself as the center of the cosmos. Well, you were there. And if the cosmos includes a goat, a cave, and some cleverly arranged stones, then yes, he's definitely at the center. By the firelight, you notice something else. The rocks he's placed, they glow slightly, each with a different hue. Red for Hera, blue for Poseidon, black for Hades. It's not dramatic, not flashy, but it's there. Zeus hums a low, looping tune as he begins to drift into sleep scepter, resting across his lap like a forgotten toy. You begin cleaning up the feast again. A bowl of grapes here, a melted pastry there, one suspicious puddle you decide not to touch. Amalthea nudges you gently as you work her breath warm against your back. She seems amused, or proud, or maybe just sleepy. You sit by the cave entrance after everything's cleared. Outside, the stars pulse gently, You look up and imagine those glowing rocks in Zeus's circle one day becoming constellations. They'll have stories, drama, war, but it all starts here in a goat cave with thunder breath and fig juice. You smile. Some dinner-shaped empires. This one just shaped a pantheon. You've always thought of goats as simple creatures, head-buddy, grass-focused, occasional climbers of things they shouldn't be on. But Amalthea, she's something else entirely. Tonight, under a moon as full and silver as her coat, she moves like a creature carved from old stars. Her hooves barely touch the ground. Her breath steams like warm wind. And when she steps to the mouth of the cave and bleats once softly, reverently, you hear a response. Not an echo, not a fellow goat, something older. You peer out, squinting into the shadows. A low hum fills the air. Rhythmic, not threatening. More like a lullaby played on stone. Then you see them, not quite goats, not quite spirits. Figures at the edge of the trees. Four-legged, yes, but wreathed in mist, their horns coiled like vines, and their eyes glowing faintly gold. They don't step forward. They wait. And Amalthea nods, once then returns to the cave. You watch her lie down beside Zeus like nothing's happened. You, of course, are deeply unnerved. The next morning, you ask the Koritz if they saw anything strange last night. The short one again polishing his helmet with aggressive pride shrugs. Just the usual. Sacred visitors, probationary spirits, maybe nymphs, or seasonal goats. Seasonal goats. They only appear under certain moons, he says, with the confidence of someone who's 60% guessing. You decide to investigate, which in your case means climbing to a small ledge above the cave where the sunlight breaks earlier and squinting into ancient folklore like it's a breakfast menu. You think back to stories the locals told, ones you thought were background noise. They speak of creatures called Egipanes hybrid beings, half goat, half spirit, sometimes mistaken for satyrs, but softer, more protective, and tied always to divine children. Some say they were guardians of young gods. Others say they were the dreams of the first goats, given shape by mountain winds, and left to watch over mortal caves. Historians still argue whether Egipanes were literal figures, symbolic representations of fertility and nature, or just misunderstood shadows seen after too much sacred wine. But last night you saw something, and it looked back. Back in the cave, Zeus is stacking rocks again. Carefully, precisely. Each stone gets placed, examined, tapped 3 times, then blessed with a puff of baby breath that smells faintly like thyme and static. He's building something, a shrine perhaps, or a fortress, or if you're being honest, a very messy pile, but there's intent behind it. He hums as he works that same circular tune he's been muttering for days, the one you can't get out of your head. Amalthea joins him, doesn't help, just watches. Her presence feels like approval. You crouch beside them and touch one of the stones. It's warm, and when you lift it, you notice a groove underneath a small spiral carved into the base. Not made with a tool, etched by lightning maybe, or something older. You start turning the other stones. Each has a symbol, a line, a mark. It's not alphabet, it's design, pattern, order. Are you writing? You ask Zeus softly. He doesn't answer, just places the next rock and claps. You step back and look at the full layout. It's not a wall, it's not a throne. It's a map, not of mountains or seas or stars, but of relationships. Sibling to sibling, goat to god, sky to cave. He's mapping the world as he understands it through sound and scent and touch and light. You are there, a small pebble placed near the edge, just close enough to the center to matter. The cave feels still like it's listening, and then Amalthea bleats once, quiet, final. Zeus stops building. He crawls into her side and pulls her closer, resting his head beneath her neck. The map remains untouched, glowing faintly in the evening light. You lie beside them and stare at the ceiling where water droplets reflect the flickering firelight like stars. One of them falls, hits your nose. You don't move. Outside, the night thickens. Inside, the goat watches over thunder, and the map of everything hums quietly beneath your fingertips. The thing about goat mythology, once you start noticing it, it's everywhere. You're lying on your back beside the dwindling evening fire, watching Zeus sleep. With his mouth slightly open, he drools a little. Thunder now, no big deal, and your thoughts drift. First to Amalthea, then to goats in general, then to goats in other places, other stories. It turns out this isn't a Greek-only situation. In fact, the more you think about it, the more you realize something odd. Goats keep showing up in divine company all over the map. Not as kings, not as warriors, but as supporters, guardians, midwives to power. Take the Norse gods, for instance. There's Thor, yes, the other thunder god. Travels by goat chariot, not a metaphor. Literal goats, Tangrisnir and Tanjoster, pull his ride across the sky's hooves, sparking lightning breath, fogging up the fjords. He eats them at night. They resurrect in the morning. Recyclable livestock, basically. Cozy and terrifying. Then there are the Sumerians who tucked goats into myth like sacred footnotes. Some Mesopotamian art even shows horned beasts seated near thrones like trusted advisors made of wool and starlight. One tablet fragment refers to the bleed of fate, though scholars still argue if that was poetic or just a very literal omen. The Celts had goat spirits associated with fertility and madness. The Hittites had goat-headed deities guarding certain temples, and even in far-off corners of Africa and Asia, goats often show up in creation tales, tireless climbers of mountains that birthed the sun. You're beginning to suspect that goats were ancient humanity's emotional support animals for interacting with the divine. Amalthea stretches beside you, her front leg twitching in her sleep, like she's dreaming of long grass and goat diplomacy. You glance at Zeus, his hand resting on her side, like he's anchoring his dreams to something stable, and maybe that's the truth of it. Gods are wild, unpredictable, loud, but goats stay. Historians still debate whether this trend was coincidence or collective symbolism. Some argue goats were simply practical, easy to herd, easy to feed, less likely to gore you than bulls. Others point to their uncanny ability to survive nearly anywhere, making them ideal stand-ins for resilient sacrifice and eternal patience. Fringe theories your favorites, let's be honest. Go even further that goats weren't just companions of gods, they were chosen. Vessels of raw, stubborn power disguised as livestock. Soft-spoken anchors for forces too wild to exist unmoored. You think about this as you brew the evening tea goat milk steeped with thyme honey, and something from a pouch labeled, "Do not use on Tuesdays." You sip carefully, it tastes like dreams and socks warmed by the sun. Zeus stirs. Not the dramatic "let me summon lightning" stir, just a sleepy squirm. He reaches for his scepter, formerly a spoon now somehow adorned with a sprouting fig leaf, and pulls it to his chest. He murmurs something. You can't make out the word, but it feels old, heavy, like he's practicing a name that hasn't been invented yet. Then, still half asleep, he rolls over and burrows into Amalthea's side again. You sit in the quiet, cradled between sleeping storm and ancient beast, and consider your place in all this. You're not divine, not immortal, not particularly brave, but you're here, bearing witness, writing your own chapter in a story that stretches across pantheons and continents. And if that chapter includes sacred goat poop, slightly burnt eyebrows, and the best fig tart you've ever tasted, so be it. Tonight, under the stillness of a moonlit cave, you see the pattern more clearly than ever. Wherever there are gods being born, there is always a goat nearby. You never expect to find a god in the stars until one of them climbs into it. It's well after midnight. The cave is unusually still. Zeus is finally blessedly asleep. Not the half-dozing, thunder-muttering kind of sleep you've grown used to, but full limb flop, tongue out. I've wrestled with gravity and one sort of slumber. His tiny chest rises and falls like it's moving the tides. Amalthea is curled beside him, her body forming a crescent moon around his glowing little form. Her horn glints in the low light, that broken tip still faintly humming from its cornucopian awakening. You step outside, craving a moment of cool air and silence. The night sky greets you like a memory you forgot was yours. And there, tucked just above the ridgeline, you see something new, a faint constellation. It's not one you recognize, but something about it feels familiar. Two curved arcs, a small star cluster between, like a horn or a goat's silhouette rearing against the sky. You sit on a rock and stare at it for a long time. The stars don't move, but the longer you look, the more they feel intentional. And you remember the story, not from a priest or poet, but from the first time you arrived here when a shepherd whispered it between yawns. Capricorn, the goat constellation, said to be a gift from Zeus himself, a tribute to his first caretaker. Some versions claim it's Amalthea ascended. Others say it's her child, or her soul thrown skyward by divine gratitude. Historians still argue whether the constellation was originally associated with Amalthea or co-opted later for more convenient myth-making. Some say the Capricorn story came from Babylonian scholars later shaped by Greek poets. Others say it's older than even the myths we've named. But you were here, you know. You saw the moment when goat became legend. When her milk fed lightning, her horn fed the world, and her sighs could calm a sky. You look back at the cave. Inside, Zeus stirs again. This time he reaches up with one tiny hand and traces something in the air, 3 quick swirls and a flick. A spark glows faintly at his fingertip before fading. He doesn't wake. You watch that spark fade, then return your eyes to the stars. And then you do something odd. You raise your hand. You trace the horn in the air just as he did. Nothing happens. And then a breeze. Warm, soft, like breath against your neck. You hear a faint bleat echo across the mountainside. You glance behind you. Amalthea's eyes are open. She meets your gaze, and slowly, deliberately, she blinks. There's weight to it, like she's saying, yes, that's me. And maybe she's tired. Maybe she's old. Maybe she's preparing for something bigger than this cave. But in that moment, she's still here. Grounded. Real. More than myth. You lie back on the stone arms behind your head and let your gaze drift across the night sky. You imagine travelers centuries from now looking up, pointing at Capricorn, and telling stories about divine goats and thunder gods. Some will get the names wrong. Some will mix up the dates. But if they get the feeling right, that'll be enough. You close your eyes. And for a moment, just a moment, you think you hear thunder far away, rolling across the heavens like a lullaby. Not a warning, a memory. You're awakened not by thunder, not by bleeding, but by something stranger, silence. Not the normal cave quiet you've grown used to, punctuated by Snore's sparks, or Zeus yelling at moss, but a deep, complete stillness. Like the world outside is holding its breath. Even the bees are missing. You sit up slowly. Zeus is still asleep, curled against Amalthea, whose head is resting low across her front hooves. Her eyes are closed, but not in rest. In reverence, resignation. You can't tell. There's a chill in the air. Not unpleasant, but unusual. The sort of chill that suggests something important is about to happen. You felt it once before, just before the cornucopia appeared. You shuffle to the cave entrance, trying not to wake either of them. Outside, the mountain is drenched in pre-dawn blue. The sky is softening at the edges, warming from navy to lavender, like the sun is blushing before it rises. And then you hear it, a whisper, not from the cave, from the air, not words, not breath, but a sort of message carved into wind. A hush that says change is coming. You step back inside, unsure whether you should wake Amalthea. You don't need to. She's already looking at you, calm, still, awake. You kneel beside her. You place a hand gently on her side. She doesn't move. Zeus stirs and lets out a low coo. Not thunder, just sound. The way human babies sound when the dream is good and they want to stay in it forever. Then Amalthea nudges something toward you. It's a piece of her horn, no bigger than your thumb, smooth, cool to the touch. The curve perfect. The tip faintly golden, not cracked, not broken, given. You hold it carefully. There's a weight to it, not heavy but meaningful. Like you're holding the corner of a larger story, and you understand. She's not leaving, not exactly, but her role is shifting. Her purpose here is complete. Some myths say Amalthea simply disappeared when Zeus reached a certain age. Others say she transformed into a star, into a spirit, into the essence of nurturing itself. A few even suggest she stepped quietly into another story, another godling's cave. Historians still argue whether Amalthea was ever meant to be a who or a what. Was she a being, a symbol, a stand-in for all the forgotten caretakers whose labor never made it into marble? But you know the truth, she was. That's enough. Zeus yawns, blinks, sees the horn fragment in your hand and smiles. It's not his usual mischief smile. It's softer, like he recognizes what's happening. Like he remembers. You place the horn beside him, and he places it over his heart. Amalthea rises, slowly, every joint deliberate. She walks to the mouth of the cave, turns once, and looks at you. There's no flash of light, no beam to the heavens, just the first warm rays of dawn slipping across her silver fur. And then she steps beyond the threshold. You wait. You expect thunder, a gust of wind, a divine farewell. But all you get is the faint crunch of her hooves on stone, fading into morning. Zeus doesn't cry. He sits quietly holding the horn, watching the light creep into the cave. His gaze is not mournful. It's steady, like he understands what was given and what will come next. You wrap your cloak tighter and sit beside him. The cave is quieter now, but not emptier, because some presences don't leave. They linger in straw, in sunlight, in thunder softened to a sigh. And the horn, her last gift, still glows faintly on his lap. You don't see Amalthea again for 3 days. Not physically, at least. No soft hooves clacking on the stone. No rumbling breath at your back. No warm eyes meeting yours when you forget for a moment that she's gone. But she's not really gone. Zeus doesn't cry. He doesn't fuss. He's patient now. Calmer. That wild spark, the one that used to send spoons flying and fig trees combusting, has quieted, not disappeared, just softened. Like lightning held behind glass, he still plays, he still builds, he still chews the occasional corner of his scepter, which is now starting to sprout small buds, for reasons you're not ready to explore. But there's a new presence in him now, something you can't name, but you feel it, and you're not alone in noticing. The Carets are quieter too. Their dances less frantic, their stomping more ceremonial. They've begun arranging their shields in spirals outside the cave, tracing goat-shaped sigils into the dirt. One brings you a wreath made of olive leaves and wool. For her, he says. Then adds ore for the next one. Who knows? Cryptic. Zeus watches all this with deep curiosity. He's started mimicking the shield formations with stones, placing them around the cornucopia shard like guard towers. At night, he curls beside it, one hand always resting gently on the golden curve, like he's guarding her memory, or dreaming of her still. You find yourself dreaming of her too. The second night, you see her standing at the edge of a great cliff, looking out over a sea made entirely of starlight. She turns to you and nods once. Nothing spoken, but you wake with a single phrase in your mind. She made him ready. Historians still debate what exactly Amalthea's influence meant. Was she merely a milk giver, a placeholder for a mother too busy with cosmic revolution? Or was she the mold, the first form, the foundation of Zeus's earliest values? Resilience, patience, care. One scholar writing centuries later from a wine-soaked study in Rhodes proposed that Amalthea's greatest act wasn't feeding Zeus but not fleeing him. That in his chaos, his sparks, his endless needs, she never recoiled. And maybe that's what shaped him more than thunder ever could. You sit near the cave's entrance, watching Zeus play with a beetle he's decided is a soldier. You think about all the beings who helped raise gods and never got temples, never got statues, just whispers in caves and faint stars in goat-shaped constellations. The beetle rolls onto its back. Zeus frowns, then gently flips it over. You smile. Later that evening, you take a walk. Not far. Just past the olive trees and down a slope where the grass grows in patches and the wind speaks in riddles. You carry nothing but a scrap of Amalthea's wool, which you've braided into a bracelet. For luck, for memory. And as you reach the ridge where the sky opens wide and the world looks soft and ancient beneath you, you feel it. Not wind, not voice, just warmth. Like a blanket placed over your shoulders by someone you didn't realize was standing behind you. You turn, no one there. But the smell of her lingers. Sweet, grassy, old. You whisper thank you, and the breeze answers, not in words, but in acknowledgement. Back at the cave, Zeus is asleep again. Curled around his horn, his scepter now blooming a tiny fig leaf at the top. You brush a curl from his forehead, and his skin sparks gently against your fingertips. Yeah, you whisper. She made you ready. The fire burns low, the stars hum, and somewhere far beyond the reach of this mountain, a goat steps silently into another myth. It's thunderstorm season now, not the dangerous kind, just the steady drumbeat of sky and cloud performing their old dance. Rain patters against the stones like a gentle lullaby. The cave is dry, warm, and filled with the comforting scent of damp wool-baked barley and old lightning. Zeus, of course, is thrilled. Every crack of thunder outside earns a delighted squeal. He points to the sky and babbles what you suspect are early attempts at weather control. You pretend not to be concerned when the clouds answer. He's getting stronger, not in a terrifying, world-shattering way. Not yet. But in the subtle signs, how he hums the wind into rhythm, how plants lean toward him even when the sun's behind a cloud, how the fire doesn't go out when he sleeps beside it, and how his scepter, the humble spoon that bloomed, has now sprouted a second leaf. He carries it everywhere, taps rocks with it, commands puddles, blesses bugs. You've had to stop him from giving it to the Caretas. More than once he wants them to have a turn, but you're not convinced the mountain would survive it. This morning he climbs a small outcrop inside the cave, maybe a foot high, just a lump of rock worn smooth by time, and raises the scepter high. The wind rustles, the flames bend. Outside, thunder rolls once in lazy approval. You clap. He bows. Later, as you sort through a bundle of moss for usable bedding, you spot something odd. A line carved into the rock near the cave wall. Fresh. Still dusted with pale shavings. You lean in. It's the symbol from before the spiral. But now it's joined by another, a curved arc like a crescent moon or the sweep of a horn. You recognize it instantly. Amalthea. Zeus has added her to the wall. You touch it lightly. It's not deep. Not elaborate. Just respectful. A small thank you chiseled in the only language he knows. You wonder what else he'll remember. What parts of these quiet days will follow him when the marble halls rise and the sky becomes his weapon. Historians rarely talk about the childhood of gods with much detail. They skip from birth to war, from prophecy to throne. But in this cave, you've seen something else, a becoming. And so has he. He sits beside you now, chewing a fig and humming to himself. You place a blanket over his legs. He grins mouth full and holds up the scepter for you to admire. It's growing bark. Of course it is. That night, the rain intensifies. The wind rushes through the trees like old news returning home. You huddle near the fire, Zeus curled against your side, his breath soft and even. The cornucopia fragment still glows faintly where he's tucked it under his moss pillow. In the flickering light, you see the cave, anew. Every corner's a memory now. The moss patch where Amalthea used to sleep. The ledge where Zeus learned to toss lightning. The dark corner where he whispered secrets to a beetle. The rock pile that used to be a temple but is now mostly a snack station. And the wall, your favorite wall, etched now with spirals, curves, and a single small palm print pressed into the stone. You never saw him do that, but you know it's his. And somehow that simple mark carries more weight than 1,000 bolts of thunder. Because it's real. Not myth, not marble. Just a small god. Remembering, today Zeus climbs. Not a metaphor, not a dream. He physically scales a rocky slope just outside the cave barefoot, and determines scepter clenched between his teeth like a warrior in a bedtime epic. You follow, of course. You don't have much choice. He's fast now, startlingly so. And he's begun using his powers for mobility. That's what you'll call it. Mobility. A little spark to launch him from rock to rock. a gust of wind under his feet when the ledges are too wide. Once he grabs a branch to steady himself and it bends toward him like even the trees are rooting for him now. You huff after him, knees creaking, heart pounding, clutching your emergency pouch of fig snacks and one half-burned towel. Just in case. At the top of the ridge, Zeus stands tall. Well, toddler tall. The sky stretches above him like a patient drumskin. The clouds are low and thick today, quilted and heavy with the promise of rain. And for the first time since you arrived, you realize he's taller than the cave now. Not in size, but in presence. He turns to look at you, not to check if you've caught up, not for praise, just to make sure you're still there. And then he points. You follow his gaze, and there it is. The sea, the full sweep of it. Not the glimpse you get from the cave's entrance, but the whole shimmering expanse. Silver and endless. The kind of view that makes you forget your feet hurt, or that you haven't washed properly since the last thunder hiccup scorched the bath spring. You sit beside him, share a fig. He doesn't speak, of course, but he hums, and the hum matches the wind. You realize he's sinking again, matching the tempo of the world, like it's a lullaby written just for him. And maybe it is. A hawk circles overhead. Zeus raises his hand. The hawk does not land, but it dips. Once, like a bow, then disappears behind the ridge. You chuckle. Already commanding the skies, huh? He grins. His teeth are all in now, which is good. Your blanket corners are thankful. Then in a moment you don't expect, he places his scepter in your lap. Just for a moment. Just to share it. You hold it gently. It's warm. The bark is soft, still growing. The fig leaf at the top has unfurled a little more. There's a vein of gold running through it now. You're pretty sure that's not natural. When you hand it back, he nods. The briefest flicker of understanding in those bright, mischievous eyes. You helped him grow. Not just taller, wider, deeper, softer. Historians still argue whether Zeus's early sense of justice, however flexible it turned out to be, was shaped by the titans, the cyclopes, or the nymphs of the earth. But you think it was shaped right here, on a mountaintop, with a goat, and you, and fig snacks. Back in the cave that evening, the Caretes perform a new dance. Slower, circular, less stomping, more rhythm. You realize they're mimicking Zeus's map of stones, the one he built weeks ago and still tinkers with each morning. They've started to listen to him, to watch him not as a baby but as a leader. Even Amalthea's old spot, still warm, somehow still sacred, has been marked with a spiral of moss and herbs. You didn't arrange it, it just happened. Zeus notices, he walks over, places one hand on the moss spiral, presses down once, and suddenly every torch in the cave flares gently like they were all holding in a breath, then dim again. No sparks, no fireballs, just acknowledgement. You wrap yourself in your cloak that night back against the wall, watching him sleep. He's taller now, his hair longer. He talks in dreams. You swear you hear names you don't recognize. Stars, rivers, maybe even his siblings still distant waiting for their cue. The scepter lies beside him, leaf glistening with dew that wasn't there before. And you think, the goat raised the god climbed the mountain, and now he's almost ready to descend. The day begins with thunder not outside, but from inside the cave. It's a low rumble, like someone dragging a mountain across another mountain, and it vibrates through your bones before you've even sat up. You leap to your feet, instinctively checking for smoldering goat hair or weaponized figs. But no, there's no danger. There's just Zeus standing in the center of the cave with both arms outstretched, eyes closed, and a cloud hovering above his head. A literal cloud. It's small, wispy, about the size of a goat. But it's moving, circling him slowly like a halo with bad social skills. Tiny sparks flicker along its edges, and it purrs, yes, purrs like a contented storm cat. Zeus smiles. You exhale. It was bound to happen. He's been building to this. The cloud is a culmination, not an accident. The thunder in his blood has finally decided to step out for a walk. And as with everything he does, it's surprisingly gentle, at least at first. You watch him guide at his hands, not touching, but clearly communicating. He gestures left, it turns. He waves upward, it floats. He claps and it dissolves like breath on glass. Then he giggles and makes two more. Of course. You spend the morning helping him herd his weather. Two clouds escape the cave, entirely drifting off toward the coastline. One gets tangled in a tree and gently waters it for half an hour. You decide not to interfere. Eventually, you coax him into limiting himself to just one stormlet at a time. He consents, but only after the Cortes agree to dance inside a ring of pebbles that he's now declared sacred. He's organizing the world again. You're starting to see a pattern. There's the thunder, yes, but also the order. He doesn't just want to make storms. He wants to shape them, train them, teach them to hum in harmony with the heartbeat of the earth. Historians will eventually attribute his rise to his father's downfall to prophecy, to strength of arm, or cleverness of mind. But they'll miss this part. The goat milk mornings, the spiral patterns in moss, the quiet communication between boy and storm, the learning. And you've learned too. You know now that thunder isn't just a sound. It's a statement, a rhythm, a presence. When Zeus builds a cloud, he's saying, I exist, I influence, I remain. You help him build a storm garden in the back of the cave, really just a circle of stones where he can summon weather to practice with. He's very proud of it, insists you stand inside it while he makes it drizzle gently over a pile of moss. You get damp, but the moss loves it. He smiles so wide you forget you're soggy. By afternoon, the cave is echoing with new sound intention. The stormlet hums as it drizzles. The Coretes chant in rounds. Zeus taps his scepter rhythmically against the stone floor like he's composing a song no one else knows how to hear yet. But you hear it, and you realize he's almost ready. Not ready to rule. Not yet. That comes later after rebellion and war and celestial drama. But he's ready to step out. To leave the cave, to take the lessons of goat and stone and thunder into a world that hasn't met him yet. You light the oil lamp early, letting its glow soften the edges of the cave. Zeus curls up beside the scepter and the ever-shrinking cornucopia shard. He's grown again. Not by feet or inches, but by presence. He fills the cave now, not with sighs, but with stillness. He's a calm storm, a quiet breath before a myth. You sit by the wall watching the rain cloud float in lazy circles above his head, and for the first time since you arrived, you feel it. The cave is no longer a hiding place. It's a launch pad. It's the day of the first word. You didn't expect it, though, in hindsight. Maybe you should have. Zeus has been humming, pointing, gesturing for weeks, crafting entire weather systems with the flick of a fig sticky finger. But today, just after a nap, and midway through squishing a plum into his own ear, he pauses, looks up at you, and says, boom. Just one syllable. Round, confident, like he's been saving it. You blink. Did you? He smiles, then says it again. Boom. A crackle flares across the fire pit. You clap without thinking. Excellent use of onomatopoeia. He claps too. Everything claps. The clouds, the curetes. Even the wind outside seems to give a polite little gust. From that moment on, everything is boom. Food boom. Goat boom. Lightning double boom. He uses it for emphasis affection declarations and disapproval. You've never heard a toddler make a single syllable feel like an entire language. You begin writing it down just in case. You draw little symbols in the dirt. Spiral for Amalthea. Curved line for the horn. Jagged bolt for boom. Zeus watches, then adds his own a swirl with a dot in the center. A name perhaps, or an idea. He's building vocabulary, mythology, the beginnings of a pantheon's language, one muddy syllable at a time. Historians will credit the oracles and the poets with shaping divine tongues. But you'll know better. You'll remember how the king of the gods first named his thunder after the sound it made when he dropped a plum on his foot. Later that day, he starts combining words. Boom goat, he says, petting a cloud. Boom rock, he shouts, tripping over one. Boom you, he giggles, pointing at you while you choke on barley tea. You're honored. You try to teach him other words. Gentle ones. Thank you. Soft. Wait. He tries them all. But everything still circles back to boom. Because he is boom. Not just the noise, not just the flash, the force, the arrival. When Amalthea first nuzzled him into the world, she must have known. She must have felt it in his heartbeat, his tiny fists. This one would shake the sky someday. But first, he would name it, and he'd name it loud. That night he stands at the mouth of the cave. The stars are out, gentle and scattered, like someone spilled olive oil on velvet. He raises his spoon scepter and says one last word before bed. Boom. A flash. Far off in the distance over the hills. Not lightning, not magic. Just acknowledgement. You wrap him in his moss blanket. Lay him beside the soft glow of the horn fragment. He sleeps quickly, still mumbling syllables in his dreams. You wonder what language the gods dream in. You suspect it starts here. And you whisper a word of your own to the night. Thanks. For the boom. For the quiet after. For witnessing the day a god found his voice. You can feel it in your knees before you feel it in the air. Change. It's subtle, like the way a cave breathes differently before a storm. The Correes are unusually quiet this morning. They've stopped dancing, stopped planking, even stopped arguing about whether thunder tastes more like metal or figs. They just wait. You ask what they're waiting for. One shrugs. He's leaving soon. You blink. Leaving the cave. Another nods. All gods do, eventually. You look at Zeus still asleep, still curled around his scepter, and the cornucopia shard his breath, rising and falling in soft pulses that make the moss around him stir gently. He doesn't look ready for anything. He looks like a very tired fig thief, but then again, everything he's done has come quietly. You step outside to clear your head and immediately stop short. The air has changed. Not colder, not warmer, just bigger. The sky seems taller somehow. The mountains lean in. Even the trees look like they're listening. And then you see it. A trail, not a road, not a goat path, just a series of small, smoothed over stones, winding their way from the cave down toward the lowlands. You've never noticed them before. You'd swear they weren't there yesterday. But now they shimmer faintly in the morning light. Zeus made a way out. You return to the cave and kneel beside him. He's still sleeping, but his hand is clenched tight around his scepter. The fig leaf at the top has fully unfurled now, broad-veined with gold pulsing, like it has its own rhythm. You place your palm gently on his eyes open. No surprise, no fear, just awareness. He looks at you, then past you, toward the mouth of the cave, toward the path. Boom go, he says softly. You laugh, blinking faster than usual. Yeah, boom go. He stands. No stumbling, no stretching. Just up, like a tree rising out of stone. He lifts the scepter, taps the cornucopia shard, picks it up and places it inside your pouch. A gift. A goodbye. A continuation. Then he walks to Amalthea's old spot, the spiral of moss, where her warmth still lingers and kneels. You don't move, you barely breathe. He places one hand on the moss. The spiral glows once faintly, then fades. A thank you. And then without a word, he starts down the path. The Correes follow, not marching, not stomping, just walking. Shields slung over their backs. Quiet, reverent. Like men who've seen the beginning of something they'll never fully explain. You follow, of course, because this is what you've been here for. Not just the caretaking, the watching, the surviving, but the witnessing. Zeus, god of thunder, baby of stormwalker, of cloud, is leaving the cave. He doesn't look back. He doesn't need to, because the cave isn't going anywhere. It's a part of him now. And you take one last look at the entrance, the straw, the stones. The faded lightning burns on the far wall, and you whisper one final word. Ready? Because he is. Because you are. Because the story no longer fits in the cave. It's ready for the world now. You walk behind him, Zeus, your thunder child, your mountain echo, your once diapered storm cloud down the path that wasn't there yesterday, but now feels like it's always been waiting. Each step is steady, each footfall light, but resonant. He doesn't look back. Not because he doesn't care, but because he trusts you're there. You feel oddly honored to be included in that assumption. The Correes move in a loose semicircle around him, more guardians than performers now. Their shields hang like memory on their backs. The dance is over. The watch is ending. below the island unfolds. It's greener than you remember, or maybe you just see it differently now. The olive trees seem to lean toward the path branches arching like arms in a temple. Figs hang low, heavy with sweetness. Goats graze lazily on far cliffs, as if nothing in the world is about to shift. But it is, because he is. Halfway down the ridge, you pass a flat stone marked with a spiral, another with a thunderbolt, another with a shallow indentation shaped like a hoof. You realize this path is older than him, or maybe outside time entirely. It wasn't built before, it was built because he needed it, because he willed it, because that's what gods do. At one point, he stops beside a stream, not a mighty river, just a trickle of water dancing between stones. He kneels, touches the surface. It ripples in response, forming patterns you've seen before: the spiral, the crescent, the little arc of a goat's horn. Then he lifts a small pebble and hands it to you. You take it without question. It's warm. You keep walking. By midday, you reach the edge of a grove you don't recognize, but Zeus does. He walks straight to a tree and places his palm against its bark. The tree hums. Literally hums. A soft, resonant tone that makes your teeth tingle. He closes his eyes. For a moment, nothing moves. Then you hear them. Voices. Not close, not clear, but distinct. Laughing, singing, arguing, calling. The Olympians. His siblings. His storm-tossed family. They're not here, not yet, but their presence blooms like fog at the edge of a dream. You feel Hera's precision, Hades' silence, Poseidon's pressure like seawater in your ears. They're not children anymore. They're waiting. And Zeus, he opens his eyes, and for the first time you see it, command. Not just joy, not mischief, not curiosity, but knowing, bearing. The first weight of sky beginning to rest on his shoulders. He walks on. The grove opens into a clearing where the clouds hang lower, closer. The air is thicker charged, like it's waiting to be named. Here Zeus stops, plants his scepter into the ground. You hold your breath. He raises both arms, palms up. The wind stills. The birds hush. The clouds draw close like curtains. Then, in a voice still high and boyish, but undeniably sure, he speaks. Boom. The sky cracks open, not in rage, in recognition. Light flares above, but not downward. It arcs up into the clouds, into the future. A signal, a memory, a beginning. The Caretes kneel. You do too. And for a moment, just a moment, you swear the earth exhales beneath your knees. The ceremony is brief. He plucks the scepter back from the ground, nods once to each of you, then continues walking into the fog that smells like figs, honey, ozone, and war. You do not follow. You can't. The cave was your chapter. This is his. You stand at the edge of the clearing, the pebble still warm in your hand. The path behind you glowing faintly with all the places you've been, and you whisper boom, because it's the word that started it all, because you need the world to remember. You don't return to the cave. You think you might at first, just to gather your things, say a proper goodbye, sweep the floor one last time, maybe light the oil lamp and watch the shadows dance across the ceiling where the spiral is carved. But when you glance back toward the mountain, it's gone. Not vanished, not erased, just shifted. Folded back into the fabric of the world like a secret that's finished being told. The trail you walked so many mornings is no longer there. The olive trees are still standing. The stones are still warm. But the entrance, the cave, it's sealed, or perhaps it never was a place. You sit on a sun-warmed rock and try to understand what it means to lose something sacred, not in grief, but in completion. Amalthea is gone. Zeus has stepped forward. The cave has closed. And you're still holding the pebble. You turn it over in your palm. It's smooth and round pale with a single golden vein running through it, like a frozen bolt of lightning. You press it to your ear on a whim. It hums. Not music, not voice, just presence. It hums like a heartbeat. You place it in your pouch, next to the horn shard, and one last fig you saved on instinct. You think this is your myth now. A pouch of sacred leftovers. A story no one will believe. You wander down the hill into the world of mortals where the sky is just weather again and goats are regular. You pass through villages where people complain about rain, where thunder is just noise, where children cry and fig trees don't burst into flame. But every now and then someone looks up, pauses, tilts their head at the sound of a distant boom, not from the earth, but from above. And you smile, because, you begin leaving small things behind. A spiral scratched into the side of a well, a crescent drawn in the dust near a baker's stall, a single fig split open and placed on a stone in the shape of a spoon. You don't stay long in any one place, but people start noticing, asking questions, sharing rumors. There's a child in the hills who talks to clouds. There's a trail that vanishes in moonlight. There's a goat constellation that glows brighter when it rains. And there's a traveler, quiet, kind-eyed, never named, who listens more than they speak and always smells faintly of time and old fire. That's you. You don't correct them. You don't need to, because one day when the poets are older and the temples rise when the world is ready to remember, they'll ask where Zeus began. They'll try to find the cave. They won't, but they'll find your marks, your spirals, your pebbles, and maybe they'll understand. Gods aren't born in thunder. They're raised in silence. And someone was there to watch seasons pass, not all at once, but in quiet, creeping ways. The figs ripen, fall, and ferment. The moss in your pouch dries and flakes. The spiral marks you've left in towns and along roads begin to fade beneath the scuff of sandals and time. But the pebble still hums. You carry it everywhere, tucked in the fold of your pouch like a heart you're too stubborn to let go of. Every few weeks you hold it to your ear again, and every time the hum is different. Not louder, not clearer, just changed. Like someone adding verses to a song you used to hum in the dark. You travel farther now. Crete fades behind you, replaced by wide fields and winding coasts. You cross rivers where the fish leap high and stare a little too long. You sleep under trees where the bark is marked sometimes faintly with a spiral you didn't carve. You're not the only one telling the story anymore. In one village, you overhear a boy teaching his sister to say boom whenever she sees lightning. You ask him where he learned that. He shrugs. Everyone knows. In another, a shepherd swears his goats started sleeping in a spiral during storms. You don't laugh, you just leave a fig near their enclosure the next morning. Somewhere along the way, people begin calling you the keeper. You didn't ask for it. You didn't earn it. You don't mind. You keep things. That's what you do. You keep the pebble. You keep the memories. You keep the silence of that cave and the way Amalthea used to chew in rhythm with the rain. One night in a town with no name, a girl with olive dark eyes and a head full of stories asks you what Zeus was like as a baby. You pause. Then you answer. He bit everything. She laughs. You tell her more. About the clouds he tried to eat. About the beetle he declared king. About the first time he said boom and the way the cave glowed like a sky about to speak. When you finish, she blinks and says, "That doesn't sound like a god." You smile. Exactly. She tells her friends. They tell theirs. The myth begins to grow not as a tale of conquest, but as a memory of fig storms and a goat who gave everything without asking. And you keep moving, not because you're lost, but because the story isn't finished. One evening in a city far to the north, thunder cracks just as the sun sets. Everyone flinches. Everyone but you. You stand quietly, and for the briefest of moments hidden in the clouds you see it. A spark. A figure. Not a boy anymore. Tall. Bright. Carrying something that looks suspiciously like a spoon with a fig tree growing from the tip. You raise your hand. Not in greeting. Not in farewell. Just in acknowledgement. Because gods don't forget, and thunder remembers everything. You don't talk about the cave anymore, not unless someone asks just the right way. Not unless they're quiet. Not unless their voice dips when they say, "What was she like?" Not Zeus. Her. Because Amalthea isn't a story you share in the market or at a tavern. She's not for loudmouths or scroll collectors. She's for listeners. For those who know that behind every lightning bolt is a lullaby. So when the girl with the spiral necklace finds you on the coast of Naxos and asks, "Did she have a name?" the goat, you pause. And you nod. Yes, you say softly. Her name was Amalthea. She doesn't laugh. Doesn't question. She simply kneels down, draws a spiral in the sand, and waits. So you tell her about how Amalthea stood between a baby god and the hunger of time, how she didn't flinch when his cries cracked stone, how she fed him when the sky itself was watching. You describe the way she blinked like an oracle and chewed like a philosopher. The girl asks, did she know who he was? You nod again. Of course. But it didn't change the way she held him. That night, the girl gathers her siblings and friends and retells your words. Not exactly as you said them, but close enough. In her version, Amalthea has golden hooves and a laugh like running water. You don't correct her, myths do what they need to do. Historians will never agree on Amalthea's role. To most, she'll remain a footnote, a creature with milk and a name and not much else. But among the villages you've passed through, among the ones who remember how lightning learned to speak, her legend grows. A goat who mothered a storm, a spirit who made thunder safe. You begin to notice the signs. A spiral etched into the lintel of a temple, a fig tree planted in the shape of a crescent horn, a lullaby that ends not with sleep but with boom. And in the quiet moments you still feel her. Not in grand visions, not in dreams, in stillness. When the fire has burned low, when the wind circles but does not bite, when a child laughs and the sky just for a moment answers back, that's when you know she's remembered. One village even builds a small shrine. Nothing elaborate. Just a smooth stone with moss at its base and a carved line, one spiral, one lightning bolt. The people leave offerings. Not gold, not incense, just figs. And milk. You leave a pebble there, humming in your hand, still warm from some thunder far away. And when you walk away, you do not look back. Because Amalthea never asked to be worshipped, only witnessed. And you're still witnessing, still keeping, still quietly, gently making sure the world doesn't forget the goat who raised a god. You find the cave again, though not the same cave. This one is smaller, nestled in the cliffs above a valley where sheep outnumber stars and children speak in wind whispers. There's no spiral carved in the stone, no thunder in the air, just moss shadow and the faintest scent of old stories. You sit at the entrance and wait. Not for Zeus, not for Amalthea, for whatever comes next. The locals don't know who you are. They bring bread cheese, the occasional question. One old man asks if you're the shepherd who talks to clouds. You say no. He nods as if that means yes. One morning a girl no older than 4 appears beside you with a stone in her hand. She offers it without words. You take it. It hums. You blink. Where did you find this? She points. In the grass. It was glowing. You hold it up. There's no light, just warmth. You nod slowly. Would you like to hear a story, you ask? She sits. So you begin not with Zeus but with a goat. You tell her about Amalthea, who didn't speak but taught, who didn't fight but protected, who didn't leave behind thrones or temples just a way to care for what the world wasn't ready for yet. You expect her to drift off halfway through. She doesn't. She listens like the cave did, patient, still, reverent. And when you finish, she stands, walks to the cave wall, and scratches a small spiral into the stone with the glowing rock. You don't say anything. You don't need to. That night, lightning hums on the horizon. Not close, not angry, just there, like a memory breathing through clouds. The next day, more children come. Then their parents. Then a traveling monk who hums boom beneath his breath without knowing why. You plant a fig tree at the edge of the path. Water it with silence. Leave a pebble at its base. And the people begin calling the cave the Horn. Not because they know the full story, but because they feel it. The shape of care, the curve of sacrifice, the echo of a goat's breath on the brow of a god. You stay for a season. Then you leave quietly without farewell because that's how this story moves. And somewhere far ahead of you, you know Zeus is still walking too, shaping worlds, naming stars, listening for the sound of a hoof on stone, because some lessons are never unlearned, and some names whispered softly into the bones of the earth are never lost. The cities are louder now. You wander through them like a thread through a needle tucked beneath cloaks, hidden in marketplaces, drifting quietly between the stories people think they know. Marble columns tower above you. Statues gleam under sun-polished skies. Priests shout prayers to gods who wear thunder like a crown, and none of them know. Not really. They speak of Zeus the sky splitter, Zeus the lawgiver, Zeus the mighty. They raise their arms to clouds and demand rain or war or mercy. They build temples, burn offerings, compose hymns, but no one sings of the goat. No one hums the spiral lullaby. And yet you see it, in places they didn't mean to place it. A spiral pattern in the floor tiles of a temple courtyard. A horn-shaped handle on the sacred wine jug. A carving in the shadow of a colonnade, worn almost flat, but still there a spoon. You don't correct anyone. That's not your task. You sit near fountains and under fig trees and listen. Because occasionally, only occasionally, you hear him. Not in voice, but in wind. In rain that arrives a little too perfectly. In a flash of lightning that dances just once gently around the rooftop before fading. No drama. No wrath. Just presence. The kind that says, I'm still learning, and only once you see him. Not on a throne, not with eagles and laurels and spears, but on a low hill outside a city, alone, watching the stars. You don't call to him. You just sit a few paces away. He glances at you, and he remembers. You know it in the way his eyes narrow slightly, the way his fingers twitch like they're about to clutch a fig that isn't there, the way he says nothing but the air between you feels warm. Like a cave, you stay until dawn. Then you rise, brush off the dust, and move on. That's the deal after all. You witnessed, you kept, you still keep. Later in a city square, a street performer entertains children by making thunder sounds with a cracked pot and a spoon. You watch as a little boy copies him, lifts his own spoon and shouts, boom. Everyone laughs. You don't. You smile. Because there it is, again the ripple, the myth that no one credits, the truth hidden behind marble. Not every god needs remembering, but every god remembers who raised them. And sometimes, they send a storm just soft enough to say, still with me. You reach the edge of the known world and keep going. Not because you're lost, but because the story keeps stretching. Beyond the olive groves and white stone temples. Beyond the vineyards that remember Orpheus. Beyond the painted ships where sailors carve prayers to Poseidon with grease-stained knives. You go where the myths haven't settled yet. Where the stories still bend like reeds in the wind. And what do you find? A boy in the mountains of Thrace drawing spirals on a goat's flank with ash from the fire. A midwife in a riverside village who teaches new mothers to hum boom while they rock their children. A wind chime made from horn fig wood and stone. Its tone so low and steady you feel it more in your bones than your ears. None of them know why they do it, but you do. It's Amalthea's echo. It's the shape of care passed down through hands that never held a scepter but held everything else. You stop teaching, you just listen, because by now the story is outpacing you, and in every place you stop someone has already left a sign. A spiral scratched into a market stall. A goat painted on a shield, not fierce but gentle. A fig tree planted outside a schoolhouse. Historians don't record these things. They count battles, kings, edicts. They trace Zeus's rise in stone and conquest. But the children, the grandmothers, the strangers with rough hands and soft eyes, they trace it in remembrance. And you begin to understand that your role is changing too. You were once the keeper, now you're the whisperer. You leave fewer marks, speak fewer words, but when you do, they land. In one fishing village, a child asks, what did he sound like when he laughed? And you say, like the first clap of thunder that doesn't scare you. In another, a sculptor offers to carve your likeness. You decline, but you leave him a pebble. When he dies, they say he whispered boom and smiled. You're not trying to make a religion. You're just trying to keep a thread from snapping, to make sure the quiet part of the story survives the noise. And somewhere in the distance, the gods have grown. They're busy now, enthroned worship debated. Zeus rules from Olympus, flanked by symbols and ceremony. You don't need to visit. You know he remembers. Because the weather still pauses for you. Because every seventh lightning strike always lands just outside your campfire. Because the goat-shaped constellation still flickers an extra star on your birthday. You sit by the sea one night and ask no one in particular, did I do enough? The waves don't answer, but the wind curls in like a warm breath, and the fire doesn't go out even when the storm begins. You've grown older, though no one seems to notice. In every village you pass through, people still call you traveler, listener, keeper, storyteller. Children tug at your cloak. Strangers offer bread without asking your name. To them, you are timeless, not young, not old, just known. But your knees ache more in the mornings now. Your pouch feels heavier, and sometimes when you sleep, you dream of moss floors and goat breath and the muffled laughter of a god learning how to clap. You never stayed anywhere long, until now. It's a coastal village. Quiet. A few stone houses, a fig orchard, a shrine no one remembers building. There's no temple to Zeus here, just a spiral etched into the well cover and a horn-shaped rock someone keeps placing flowers beside. You rent a room with a view of the sea and tell yourself it's just for the winter, but spring comes. You plant a fig tree. Summer follows. Children start gathering under your window at dusk. They ask questions, not the kind historians ask, the real kind. What's thunder made of? Why do some people forget stories? Did the goat ever miss him? You answer every time. Sometimes with facts, sometimes with silence, sometimes with a fig split neatly in half and placed gently on a flat stone. You keep the pouch close. The pebble inside still hums quieter now, but constant. The cornucopia shard no longer glows, but when you hold it, your hands feel steadier. And then one day a child brings you something. A spiral, carved into bone, crude, uneven, but unmistakable. I made it, she says proudly, like the old stories, like the goat cave. You nod, and inside your chest something opens like a sky. Because you know now, it's not about keeping the cave alive. It's about planting pieces of it everywhere until the world is full of caves, full of quiet protection, full of tiny thunder gods trying to speak, full of goats who give everything and never ask for shrines. That night, you place the bone spiral on your windowsill. And for the first time in years, you sleep deeply dreamlessly as the wind shifts outside. In the distance, you hear thunder, but soft, like a laugh, like a lullaby made of stone and fig and milk, like someone remembering the beginning. You wake one morning and know it's time. Not in a dramatic, thunder-splitting sky kind of way, just a feeling. Like a story coming to its last page. Like a spiral gently completing itself. The pebble in your pouch is silent now, not dead, just resting. Its hum has faded to memory. The cornucopia shard is cool to the touch, its gold vein dulled to the color of old promises. You hold them both one last time before wrapping them in soft cloth and placing them inside a small stone box beneath the fig tree. You do not bury them. You plant them. You whisper grow not because you expect it to, but because you've learned that expectation is the beginning of every myth. You sit under that tree all morning watching the sea, which has no reason to remember you, but seems to glisten a little more today. And then as the sun leans westward and the shadows stretch long like yawns, you hear footsteps behind you. You know who it is before you turn. Zeus. Not the boy, not the scepter-wielding toddler, but the king, the storm-carved adult, tall, bright, cloaked in sky. But his eyes, they are exactly the same. Still that wild, curious glint. The one that used to follow beetles around the cave. The one that once stared into your soul over a spoon and a plum. He says nothing for a long while. Then you stayed. You nod. You grew. He kneels beside the fig tree and touches the stone box beneath its roots. Still hums, he says softly. You smile, only when someone listens. He sits with you until the stars emerge quietly, companionably, like the thunder never left either of you. You share figs. You say nothing more. He leaves just before dawn. You watch his shape fade into the sky. No fanfare, no lightning, just movement. Graceful. Inevitable. And you lie back beneath the tree, hands folded over your chest, and close your eyes. Not to sleep, but to listen, because that's what you were always meant to do. You were never the thunder. You were the silence that held it, the cave that gave it room, the spiral drawn and redrawn in every generation. And somewhere, maybe tomorrow, maybe centuries from now, another child will be born with sparks in their breath, and they'll need a goat, or a pebble, or a listener, and someone maybe not you, but someone shaped like you will be there. Because gods don't start alone. They start with love, with warmth, with you. Now that the story has gently closed, let your breath slow too. Inhale deeply as if you're drawing in the scent of fig trees under a sun-warmed sky. Exhale slowly like the sigh of a cave, long remembered, but softly silent. Let your muscles soften. Let your shoulders drop. You've walked alongside a god tonight, but more importantly, you've been reminded that Behind every great roar of thunder is something softer. A cradle, a cave, a spoon-turned scepter, a goat who never asked for statues. And maybe in your own quiet way you've played that role too. Maybe you've been someone's stillness, someone's grounding, someone's shelter while they found the lightning inside themselves. That matters. So, let your mind settle now like moss across stone. Let each breath become the rhythm of old stories retold by stars. There's no rush, no final task. Just the comfort of having heard, having felt, and now having rested, because you kept the story alive. And the story will keep you too. Sweet dreams, keeper.